right, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Course of Action. I have an incredible guest today who has spent some time as a film director and has a very unique background and an interesting profession that I think you're going to find intriguing. So let's welcome LL Richman to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah. I just thanks so much for volunteering to come on, and I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about um, your background and your history, as well as your books. And I think there's a lot that kind of ties into all those things.
Well,
Um,
thanks for inviting me.
yeah, sure. And I think as I was reading the information you filled out for the show, I was just kind of like, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. It just kept going on. I was like, well, geez, there's so much to talk about. Let's first jump right into film directing. 2 decades as a film director?
Actually, a little bit more than that, but yeah, let's go with 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I've written probably, oh gosh, well over 1,000 scripts, and done everything from the sappy Hallmark stuff
Okay.
to uh, spoofs of kind of comedy. I had a couple of web shows. One was called Cocktails and Creativity, and one was called Another Holiday We Didn't Invent. So it's just storytelling's always been in my background. I've always, from a little kid, I was always a storyteller,
Mm,
and this is just a form of visual storytelling, really.
sure. How did you get into film directing?
I as you know, my background's in science. I was a NASA brat. So I actually started as in college with biomedical engineering, and I had a couple of not so great teachers. I got kind of bored, and my junior year, I switched to radio, television, film because it looked like fun. So all of my electives are in like differential equations and optics and engineering physics and stuff like that. And it wasn't until later on that I went back to get my master's in physics. Um, so that's how I started out. That's how I fell into it. I actually have a film degree.
And over 1,000 scripts, you said?
Mhm, mhm.
Wow. Wow. Now,
Not all of them are long,
sure.
movie scripts. There a lot of them are short, you know, series.
Yeah.
Did a series. I spent a week down at Jules Ranch down in Texas and did a series of about 26 shows. That were holiday DIY type things. It's just been all over the map.
Wow. Now, I've heard this and I've never really seen it in person, but like a typical Hollywood movie script might be less than 100 pages.
The general rule of thumb is a minute a page.
Okay. A
So
minute a page.
yeah.
So a 2 hour movie would be 120 pages.
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, you're probably looking at an average of about 100 pages, sometimes more for those bigger movies.
Right.
Wow. Wow. So that's a
We
lot
don't
to,
have a whole lot of, um, uh, what we call stage direction in fiction
yeah.
novels. You don't do a lot of that. You might have a few tags in a script, but you don't have to fill out
Yeah.
all
Well,
of the
everything's visual. So you
description
don't
because
have to say the pine
right,
trees, the sun crept through the
right, right,
pine
exactly,
trees, blah, blah, blah. You see it.
exactly.
So
Yeah. Mhm.
that goes without saying. I'm sure there's little blurbs in a script that just set the setting, but
Right.
think of how many words are just cut out by not
Yeah.
setting that because it's so visual. So,
And
um,
I've always found that film is a very collaborative process.
mhm.
And if you put too much into a script, you're limiting the DP, the director of photography. You're limiting the actor's ability to collaborate too. So
I could see that.
yeah,
Putting too many parameters, too many, maybe getting too detailed. Um,
yeah,
Something I've noticed in a lot of interviews I've watched with some actors, and I'm fans of is they think the biggest part of movie making is collaboration, is not sticking to the script,
Oh,
is finding kind of the way along the way. And some of the best showrunners and directors and actors understand that, and they know where it's supposed to go and where it's supposed to lead.
right,
They also know that things can change, and oftentimes
right.
for the better or sometimes not. And I think that's a really cool process. It's a lot different than writing, as you know very, very well. Um, you kind of have a direction you're wanting to go in, and you kind of have to stick to that. Because if you could deviate too far, next thing you know, you're like, well, I'm changing the whole premise.
If you go off scripts, yeah, then you're screwed. There's pantsers and there's
Yeah.
plotters, but in television and film, you're dealing with, yeah, it's in a way it's a lot easier, I think, personally.
Okay.
The hours suck. Really
Well,
suck.
yeah. I can't
But
imagine them being from, family
um,
friendly or anything.
I like to. When I was a director, I used to say that I was a jack of all trades and master of none, and that I worked with maestros,
Okay.
people who were just brilliant. And it was my job to see the brilliance of others and to bring it together and to let them create magic,
Yeah.
really.
I
So,
didn't know a lot about movies and film until I really listened to Jack Carr talk about how they came up with the Terminal List and how they did that series on Amazon. And
mhm.
just hearing how important the showrunner is, like I had no idea. I figured the director was the king, God. He sat on the throne. He called all the shots, like he was the man. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like the showrunner's the man. Like if you don't have a good showrunner, like the whole series is not gonna, it's not
It
gonna
really,
work.
it really takes a village. You
Yeah.
have to have a good. If you don't have a good cinematographer,
Yeah.
they have incredible vision. The editors, what there's a phrase which uh, we say jokingly. We do not mean it, in case any of my editors are watching, and that is fix it in post. You never do that. The editors, though, a lot of times do save it. They're the ones that bring it all together. And if have you
Sure.
ever seen any footage that is pre-production?
Yeah.
Pre post, it's very, there's very little color in it.
Yeah. It
We
almost
shoot,
looks bad.
right, right. The sound is bad.
Yeah.
So a lot of the magic happens afterward too. It takes a village.
Yeah. It sure does. Like I didn't
Right.
realize how much it really took from early scouting of locations and photography just to kind of see if it's even worth traveling there to get the shot that is being envisioned all the way to the post production. And I didn't know like some film studios will be editing in the 11th hour.
Oh yeah,
They'll be 20 days out from a major release and they're still fine
yeah,
tuning in post production. I think I heard that about a Marvel movie a couple years ago that
yeah.
they were.
Great projects are never, and this isn't a quote that's unique to film, but great projects are never finished. They're abandoned.
Mm.
It just you can tweak it to death, and it's the same thing with a book
Oh
too.
my
You can
gosh,
tweak it to
yes.
death.
Oh,
You know,
when I wrote
you-
my nonfiction book, I felt like I wrote it for years, and it was never right. It was never right. I finally just
congratulations,
got
by
to a
the way.
point. Thank you. I just finally got to a point. I think I said I'm turning it in.
Yeah, and the thing is, creativity is a muscle just like any other muscle, and you have to exercise it regularly, and you're constantly getting better in whatever field you're in.
Mm,
Um,
I
so
think that's a
that
good truth. That's a good truth.
yeah, so sometimes it's better to not look back at what you've done
Yeah,
10 years ago.
I think that's absolutely right because I kind of look back at some of my old writing, and I'm trying to get into fiction now, and I look back at some of my old writing, not to, I don't know, maybe look at it and judge, but more so look at it from an analytical perspective and say, look where I've came from. Because I
It's a
think every time I've opened up a new page, I've kind of said, that's getting better. I felt like I've gotten better through typing away, and I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's a big thing
absolutely
because
not.
you're not gonna.
Yeah,
I think you have to learn it. I mean,
yeah.
I've been writing, you know, school papers for 15 years now. I'm working on my doctorate now, so um,
Great.
that's a lot. And I thought, oh, I know how to write. I know how to write. I can
Mm-hmm.
do this. No, fiction is different. I think you really have to learn the genre that you're wanting to write in,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to study. You have to be a student of it, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not telling you anything that you don't know, but I think for people listening, again, having an author like you echo these things is you will always be developing yourself.
Oh, you have to. One of my favorite quotes is, "A rut is just a coffin with the ends kicked out, and if you stop learning, you're in a rut." I
Mm,
think life is all about learning.
it sure is. That is spot on. That is spot on. Well, speaking about learning, let's talk about NASA, because you are a NASA brat, and I have to admit, I've never heard that before. I've heard military brat, and I've been in the military. My kids are in the military. The military brat, but a NASA brat. Let's talk about that. Your dad was in NASA, in charge of flight safety for several big programs.
Yeah.
Um, what was it like growing up basically as a NASA brat?
It was cool. My dad and my mom both worked there for a while,
Really?
and they couldn't talk to each other. They both had top secret clearances, and they would come home, but they were it was compartmentalized, so they couldn't
Wow.
talk about their stuff. Um, and I don't remember that part because uh, she quit when I was born. But as a really really young kid, I remember we lived down in Houston, um, and I remember my dad taking me to take a kid to work day kind of thing, and walking through mission control and seeing all the
Wow.
tech, wearing my hands over the not when it was in use, but and seeing things like the big huge anechoic chamber where they would test, they put parts and pieces and run tests, so and it was completely soundless. It was these big huge foam pyramids sticking
Hmm.
out. It was just everything about it was super cool. We lived the subdivision that we lived in where a lot of the astronauts lived there, and one of them would come. He'd like to come fly over and you know do a low pass by the house to let his wife know, hey, I'm on my way home, that kind of thing. It was just cool. So I've always loved science fiction because I kind of lived it as a kid.
Yeah. How much of that influenced you to go into, of course, you fly, you have a pilot's license, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a
Mm-hmm.
pilot's license, you're into radiation physics now, correct?
Yes, I actually write full time now, so I've
Oh,
even stopped.
nice.
I kind of worked. It was a weird career because I worked. My husband is a physicist, and he owned his own consulting company where he would commission linear accelerators, and so I would leave
Hold on.
the
He
studio.
would commission what?
Linear accelerators.
Okay, let's go back. What the heck is that?
A linear accelerator, you have two different kinds of linear accelerators. You have the kind that is there's theoretical physics and then there's applied physics, and this was applied physics. Theoretical is like at Oak Ridge National Laboratory or the Princeton plasma, physics, or Stanford, or you've got the big um, uh, synchrotrons where they sling particles
Okay.
around in a big accelerator ring at relativistic speeds and smash it against something to study it.
Okay.
That's theoretical physics. Applied physics is when you have smaller linear accelerators that are cyclotrons that spin up
Mm.
electrons or protons, or and they actually can be directed to create a, a relativistic beam of radiation that can treat patients' cancer.
Okay, okay, okay.
Those are called clinacs, clinical linear accelerators.
Gotcha.
And so he would do those, and I would go up and I'd leave the studio, and I would go to my second job, which was to run the linear accelerator and run quality assurance tests on them and
So
that
you're
kind
doing filming and radiation physics at the same time?
of. Yes, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
About 15 years into um, my film career, I decided I I didn't want to get to the end of my life and look back and say, "Gee, I wonder what
Hmm.
it would have been like if I'd taken the other path when I was in college." And so I went back to get my master's in physics, and that's when I met my husband, and that's when the second career kind of took off at the same time. So
Wow. So, but now you're not doing radiation physics. You're writing full time.
I'm writing full time. Yeah.
Wow, congrats. That's a goal everybody I think wants to kind of get to, and
Yeah.
huge accomplishment. So what's it like writing full time now and kind of putting all that to the side?
Well, it's completely different. I left those careers about 3 weeks before the entire world shut down.
Oh,
And so I left the studio and said, "Okay, guys, don't let me be a hermit now, okay?" And then 3 weeks later, everyone became a hermit. And it's like, wait, that's not what I
yeah.
meant.
It's almost like you called it.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Um, it's different in that it's a much more lonely profession. It's a soul profession, and I think you have to actively work to make sure that it's not like that. So a fellow author and I decided that we would found a what we call a mastermind group. So we have 9 writers who come together, and we have our own Discord channel. They named us they decided to name us the Propellers because I'm a pilot, and one of the other writers in there is a pilot too. So we're always on the Discord, and we're always talking. I'm, of course, since I came from film, and it's such a collaborative process, I wanted to bring that with me into um, writing.
Yeah, because I mean, you know it so well, being from that creative, that different creative method.
And it has such value.
Hmm.
So the 9 of us meet on Zoom uh, once a week for 2 hours, and we do a check-in. We are there for each other if anyone's stuck. A friend of mine a lot of them are veterans.
Oh,
Most
that's
of them.
cool. I love
In
that.
most of them are Army, one's Air Force. A couple of them are former law enforcement as well.
Okay.
So anytime any of us is stuck, we have this group of people that we can bounce ideas off of. Several of us have gotten together one on one and roughed an outline. One person has helped the other rough in an outline. We put up rough drafts for others, for the team to read. It's very, it's an incredibly positive, collaborative environment,
That's
and
cool.
I would highly recommend it to
Mm.
any writer.
Man, I've been struggling like this last like 6 months of sharing anything that I've been writing. I think it's good. I worry about
This
that feedback.
this is different. This is different from you have writer groups locally that are kind of like critique circles.
Yeah.
And I kind of hesitate to say anything because I've never been part of one of those, but I have heard stories about how they can get kind of dark and negative very quickly,
Hmm.
because it's almost uh, like because you're offering up your work to be read and criticized. People feel like they have to, you know.
Yeah. Or they have
Um,
that jealousy or animosity because maybe it's better than something they wrote. Like, I don't want that. I just want like, hey, just read it and
yeah,
tell me if you liked it or not. Like,
yeah. You have to have the right, you have to have people who are. We found that the best formula for us was to find a group of people who were in the same place in their careers that we were,
mhm.
and who had the same mindset, and all of us write in the same main umbrella genre, which is science fiction, thriller. We've got a couple of people who write horror. Um, Most of us write military science fiction.
Okay.
Uh,
So you're not
because,
deviating too far away from the
no,
known.
right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really helpful thing.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to hand over, a military techno thriller to someone who was maybe writing comedy.
Clean romance.
Yeah, or some kind of romance or something. Even though it fits into maybe the fiction or the thriller genre, but just so
Yeah.
far, like especially military books, because they tend to be very um, heavy on lingo or acronyms or details that the common individual wouldn't
Yeah.
know, and when I read them, it doesn't bother me because I was military. I know a lot of it, but I have met people that were like, I didn't like reading it because it was too military.
I was
Well,
accused of mansplaining.
really?
Granted, okay, I write as LL and I do it on purpose because I figure, there's still an old guard out there that is a little. They may not, if they knew I was a woman, they might not pick it up. So I figure let's just remove that speed bump, you know.
Sure.
Um, and also because even though I haven't served in the military, my dad did. My partner, collaborator, consultant is very much uh, former Army and
Okay.
was high in special forces. He
Gotcha.
was so. Uh, I just got such a kick out of that though. They didn't know that it was the. Are you familiar with Hugh Howey's self-published science fiction award?
Mm-mm.
It's the second year that he's done this, um, and I got a review from one of the judges that said that because I had gone into because I had the type of rifle, the type, I had too much detail. It was military science fiction, and they said they felt like it was mansplaining and they got lost, which
Okay, fine. If you're not a firearms person, you're not in the military, and maybe too much detail about it could whatever. But like,
could have been this was could have been a person who prefers fantasy or a different type of subgenre in science fiction who was judging. There's no way of knowing. I didn't take offense at it, but I did.
sure, but at the same time, like, I kind of think people's critiques come from a place of negativity sometimes because, like, okay, if you like more of the science fiction, you know, um, don't read a kind of traditional military thriller. Or if you do, expect for it to have things that maybe you don't agree with or you don't necessarily love the most. Like, but don't sit there and like I've had a couple of my friends that have written some thrillers and they got some of the same critiques or feedback saying, I just interviewed somebody the other day for a new episode, and he does kind of that historical what if kind of thrillers, like
Alternate
alternate
history.
history, yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
and which sounds
Yeah.
incredibly interesting to me. But he said that he got a bad review on Amazon. I actually read it live on the air while we were recording. It was that hilarious, and
Oh,
this guy said he was like mad at him because he basically said that I think it was President Carter. he wins an election that he wasn't supposed to win, and like history has changed and all this stuff. And this guy wrote this review and was like, first of all, Carter would never do that. Second of all, and just went after him saying everything you wrote in here is complete BS. It's like, it's alternate fiction, brother. Like, it's not the truth. It's fiction. One, fiction is made up, and two, it's alternate. Like, it was supposed to be different than
Yeah.
what really happened. It's a what if scenario. Like, it was just so funny
That's
that
almost worth him using in his advertising.
I
You know,
know. That's
it's
what I said. I said, dude, this is great press. You need to pin
gold.
this to the top of.
Yeah.
I know it's 1 star, but you need to pin it to the top of the
Oh
comments
yeah.
because
Oh
this
yeah.
is gold that he said that and was so mad about it. It's like it
So
just
what
cracked
will
me
read
up.
my book is. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, you basically said the aliens came in, took over President Carter, and he changed history and blah blah blah. It's like, well, yeah, he did change history. It's not supposed to be the truth.
It's called entertainment. And
Yes,
there's a
thank you.
reason.
I mean, what do you think movies are, man? You think most of that's not real? It's made up on purpose for entertainment value.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so funny. So how did, in the bigger scope of things, before we get into your books, how did physics and school and flying and NASA and all that kind of guide you into the genre of writing that you're in now? Because you said you've done scripts everywhere from sappy hallmarks to other things. That's, you're very well rounded and with a very diverse background. How did it kind of get you into science fiction?
Well, I have always, even as a little child, read science fiction. I would swap stories, swap books with my dad. Um, and I devour. I'm a of course Clancy fan. I've read Clancy. I've read Flynn. I've read um, Daniel Silva, Kyle Mills, Mark Cameron, Mark Greaney. Oh my God, Mark Greaney.
Yeah, he's a
Um,
man.
Jack Carr, as you probably know Jack Carr was his first book. I think was co-written because Jack's not his real name. That's a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of his books. I just devoured. Greg Hurwitz, Orphan X, all of those books
Oh yeah.
are just fabulous books, and I I love those books, and I have such a background in science fiction that I wanted to marry the two. I wanted to write science fiction thrillers. I wanted, and military science fiction just felt like it was the perfect marriage of, where I could bring my science background. I
Mm-hmm.
could I could lean in to my collaborator and boy was that like drinking out of a fire hose, learning all about you know when he went through AST and what his all those fun 3-letter
Mm-hmm.
agencies that I can't talk about because I'm not allowed to.
Right.
Um, but it was so much fun. And I think that's a key too. If you don't have fun doing what you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. But it was so much fun to take the science and to create a science problem that became a crisis. And you see that a lot in Clancy. And you see
Yeah.
that a lot in,
He's probably
some
the
of the
king of it.
early.
I
Hmm?
mean, he was able to take something
Oh,
so real and turn it into a problem that was applicable to his books, and it was like,
yeah.
and Brad Thor does that really well. But Brad Thor,
Yes.
let me tell you something about Brad Thor. Brad Thor can predict the future. I swear to God, he is in the pockets of all these countries of NATO or somebody, and because he's figuring out things to happen before it happens. And I'm like, man, that's good. That reminds me of Clancy and the way Clancy did things on a global stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Thor too. I'd forgotten about him. Yeah. He's, and I like his style too. I like Thor's pacing.
It's very smooth.
It's very smooth. And if you go back to Lions of Lucerne and then you skip up to Backblast, you can see how he's evolved too,
Oh yeah.
with writing, which is really cool.
Oh yeah.
But so that's kind of where I ended up doing what I'm doing, which is I have both a near future military technothriller, and the rest of them are century or so in the future, century or two or more in the future, which is makes it basically really military science fiction.
Yeah, because you have the couple different series, the Biogenesis War files.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
one. Your new book that's coming out here in May, Vision Rising. Is that going to be a series?
Yes, it's a trilogy. Yeah.
Ooh, okay, okay. Let's talk about that. Vision Rising is your new military series trilogy that's going to be coming out May 2nd. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell me about that.
Well, Vision Rising is about a small mission unit. It's basically what would CAG Delta look like in the future, 100 years from now. They are, I call them the Saber Squadrons. And it's about a first sergeant who leads a small mission unit and ends up he's on a training mission. I don't know. I think I can say this. Area 51 has training grounds, and Delta and Dev Group both. I think that's common knowledge that they do that. Okay, so
If not, it's certainly a rumor that's floating around there
oh,
somewhere. So
right.
I'm not saying anything you can't Google.
Right. Okay, so I kind of took that concept and put them on a dome in Ganymede. So that is kind of their proving grounds. That's where they do mission workups, that kind of thing. And he's on a dry run for a mission, and an accident happens, and he goes blind.
Oh.
And he's like, I was going to cuss, and I'm not going to. He's like, man, how can I lead my team? I've just lost my career. If I can't see, I've lost my career. I can't lead my team. And he is approached by a shadow scientist who has this experimental implant that may or may not restore his sight. And he's like, what do I have to lose? So he does it. And it's an Area 51 type experiment, DARPA type experiment. And we see the DARPA of the future. And this thing restores his sight, but it does out of that more than that.
Okay.
It gives him second sight. He's suddenly able to see these blue shifts kind of fall over his vision, and he sees just a few seconds ahead what is about to take place. And he thinks he's going nuts. And he confronts her, and he finds out the true origin of this implant. And that's all I'm going to tell you, because no spoilers. But
I like it.
It's he ends up getting benched because, of course, any kind of an experiment. Delta gets the toys first, but they're not going to put the toys out in play outside the wire until they've been tested and proven.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So he's benched for a couple of missions, but he ends up being back, working with Command Authority, and is able to direct the team that is out on the mission and salvage something that would have, been on, of course, since this is 100 years in the future, and we now have colony on Mars, and we have a colony, out in the asteroid belt. It's not just on the world stage, but it's on the solar system stage, I guess you would say. But it changes the balance of power, and it goes on from there. So it's a 3-story arc that takes it that continues to build in intensity, and and stakes. The stakes get higher and higher in every book until the big conclusion at the very end. Although each book is a standalone story, it can be read by itself. It has
So
a
you're not gonna get
no
caught
cliffhanger.
or lost if you read the second one first or anything.
Right, right, exactly.
So let me ask you this: in doing your research for something like, implantable technology and stuff like that, how much of it did you kind of look at and go, "Ooh, this isn't as futuristic as maybe I thought"?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
I have in the back of my books, I have what's science and what's fiction
Oh, cool.
section. And so I talk about all of the real science that's being researched right now, and the origin of some of the stuff. Because some of the stuff that I put in there sounds like science fiction, but it's really not. We're on the cusp of
Well, yeah.
having, we've got, one of the 18D, the medic has a 3D printer, a BioInk 3D muscle, to repair muscle on site. Well, they're testing that right now.
Well, yeah, and Elon Musk has been
Or
talking about a neural implant for years now.
exactly.
So, I mean, how far off are we from what you're writing?
Not very far. I mean, there's some big hurdles that have to be overcome,
Sure.
but that's because of my science background, I tend to put a lot of nerdy stuff in there too.
That's
But
okay.
but in the back, then you can see, okay, how much hand wavium was that, and how much is that the foundation of that future technology, does how much exists today, and there's a surprising amount of it.
So let me ask you this, kind of I'm not trying to stump you or anything, but really make you think. Out of all the books you've written, out of all the research you've done, what is the one thing that you found that was like shockingly too real?
Um,
That you
oh,
thought was, this is true science fiction, it's not going to happen, and it was actually closer to home than you realized?
well, we have light bending technology where we can actually, the invisibility shield exists.
What? Okay,
There's a
we're going to come
Canadian.
back to that. Let's go to
um, you can see through the eyes of, well, okay, they have done something. I can't remember specifically what it was that they did, but they did something to the retinas of mice, and they can see both regular light and near infrared. So why would you need NODs? Why would you need any
yeah,
kind of night vision?
they can figure that out. You have it built in.
Yeah.
Wow.
There exists today, a lot of people are talking about, in the future, you read in just about every military science fiction book, that they, have optical implants where, everything is, they scrolls, you've got
Heads up
text,
display.
all that. It's basically yeah. Well, there's a California company that already has contact lenses that do that.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Now
cool.
it's rudimentary. It's rudimentary. It's not, it's not anywhere near what, we're writing in the books, but yeah, it exists. So, and of course, I mean, we've got molar mics and we've had them for
Yeah.
a decade or more. So there's a lot of tech out there that, well, I think, as we all know, there's a lot of tech out there that we don't know that's already in play.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And if you take that and then you look at, some of the research that's out there, um, it's closer. A lot of it's closer than we think.
Okay, let's go back to this invisibility shield thing that you said at
Yeah.
first. So we can bend light and we can actually make that happen?
It's through. I think it's through LEDs. Invisibility cloak. It's a company in Canada.
Okay.
Real life invisibility cloak developed by Canadian Quantum Stealth is the name of the company.
Quantum stealth.
Uh-huh. The latest invisible tech called Quantum Stealth has been developed by Hyperstealth, a Canadian camouflage design company. The material is as thin as paper, inexpensive, and requires no power source.
What? Okay. Looks like I'm going to Google that when we're done here. I gotta
Yeah,
find out more about that. That's cool.
isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is wild. So Vision Rising's coming out here in May. You told us a little bit about that. It's going to be a trilogy. What is kind of next for you now that COVID's over? You're writing full time. Uh, any thoughts of getting back into the director's chair or into movie making, or are we just doing books? What's the future look like?
The director's chair is exhausting. um, I I could be persuaded, but I think I'll stick with books for now. I have a technothriller that is completed. We have yet to. It's been. My publisher has said they want it. I've got an agent looking at it. I don't know if it's going to be a standalone or if it's going to be a series. But that one is kind of it's kind of a cross between. I actually, are you familiar with Douglas Richards?
I think I've heard that name.
Mind's Eye. He wrote Mind's Eye. He wrote Portals. He wrote Second Sight. He's more of a kind of a. Well, do you know Jerry Riddle? A.G. Riddle.
I think I've heard that name too.
Okay, so those are more techno thrillers than they are military. Um, and because their focus is on techno thrillers, their military stuff is falls far second. You know, um, uh, Doug is a friend of mine, and he and I were talking once, and he challenged me to write something about the multiverse,
Ooh.
and I went stupidly. I went sure. So Rift is, but because I write because my emphasis is far more military than his is, I took it in a military direction. So that book is coming out after the Vision Rising trilogy. I'm still not sure yet whether or not I'm going to have, it could be developed into more books. There's still more books in the Biogenesis universe that are waiting in the wings to be written. And then I don't know. That'll take me another year or two to complete that stuff, and then we'll see.
Well, where can people go to kind of stay in touch? A newsletter, website, social media. Where can they find you at?
I have a website, llrichman.com. I am on Instagram at Lisa Flyer, FLYR. And Facebook /LL Richman, and Twitter is L Richman. So,
well, Lisa, this was a pleasure. You are one interesting person. I can tell you that much. You have a ton going on. Vision Rising sounds amazing. I love your background. I love everything that you're doing, and it's just really, really cool. And I thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute blast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was great.
Of course, and we'll stay in touch. You're going to be at Thriller Fest in BoucherCon this year, I think I saw, or was that someone else?
I would like to go to Thriller Fest. I think I'm going to be at Icon and Demicon, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm still everything. I haven't bought any tickets for anything yet.
Gotcha.
So we'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again, and look forward to staying in touch.